Welcome to this second part of tonight's Opportunity Zones meetup. My name is Carl Dakin with Dakin Capital, and in this topic tonight we're going to focus on offering documents. The way they created the Opportunity Zone legislation, it requires that a person who has capital gains can take the cash from that particular gain and invest it into an Opportunity Zone fund. This is a new type of entity that's required by the statute that serves as a kind of an outsourced bookkeeper for the IRS. So they raise the money, and that money then goes from the fund into an Opportunity Zone property or into an Opportunity Zone business. Because there is at least one sale taking place in this whole combination, then there's going to be at least one offering, and we're going to be looking at the documents which are used in the conduct of that offering, which are virtually the same with a few minor differences than any other offering that might be done for sale of securities, whether that's a public or private offering or crowdfunding or anything else. But because there is going to be an offering, a lot of people are trying to make sure they're doing this right, and we're going to get into some more details about what's unique or what causes a little bit of a difference in dealing with an Opportunity Zone that you might not see in another offering. So with that, I'm going to have to manually advance my keys here. An offering is a sale, and a lot of people, they get hung up because it often involves the sale of security, but essentially you're saying, I'm going to go do something kind of weird, maybe cool, maybe risky, maybe rewarding, and it's an opportunity. And if you want to participate in that, you give me some of your resources and I'll let you into the game. So you're kind of buying a ticket. But you can be an interactive participant in the game, or you can be a passive participant, depends upon how the game is being structured. But it's essentially the person who has the game is trying to communicate to someone who has the resources that they need. This is what the game is, this is what it's about, and put the person who has the money in a position to make an informed investment decision. And we're going to go back and forth because that is a real key thing here in both the documents and in requirements that are there. Now, not all these sales are going to constitute a sale for security because there are common exemptions to securities laws where if a person invests in their own project and they're managing their own money, they're an officer or director, then that does not constitute the sale of a security. Similarly, what we're seeing here is where you may have a fund that's a dedicated single-purpose fund that is controlled by the underlying business that's going to receive the money. And in that case, the relationship between the fund and the underlying business does not constitute a sale of a security because they're being operated and managed by the same management team. But if that fund turns around and raises money from someone outside of that group, some third party or some regular investor, that offer constitutes a sale of security in almost every situation. And so the requirements of state and federal law that govern the sale of securities will impose some restrictions, constraints, and box you in to some degree on how you structure the deal. So we're going to talk a little bit about that here within the scope of what is an offering. There may be one or more offerings. So classically, the investor putting money into an Opportunity Zone fund is probably going to be an offering where the fund is going to try to explain the opportunity and they want the investors to provide them with cash coming out of their capital gains in order to do that. And so in that case, there's clearly going to be one offering where the underlying business is a dedicated single purpose and it's in effect kind of joined at the hip with the Opportunity Zone fund, common management, and so forth. There may not be a second offering involved. On the other extreme, we're seeing a lot of Opportunity Zone funds that are doing what we call multiple asset. This is an independent wealth group they're going out pitching all their people to put money into a pool like a private equity fund. So they're making an offering. We're going to go do something cool in the opportunity zone area, but we don't necessarily know what it's going to be yet. We're going to make this up as we go along. We're going to pick projects as they show themselves. And so they're pooling money into the fund, and so they're pitching the investors to give them that money and the flexibility to go out and do a variety of different projects. Now in that case, each of the underlying projects will be coming to the fund and saying, give me money out of your fund, and they're going to be making an offering to the fund. If you give us so much money out of the fund, we're going to give you a certain stakehold in this particular business. So depending upon the complexity, on the very simplest, we've had individuals take their own money, put it into their own fund, and then into their own business in order to realize the benefit of this new legislation. That's very simple. It's not the sale of security. There's only one person wearing all hats on all three entities. And on the other end of the extreme, we're seeing the very large financial institutions, as a rule, are taking the money that they're managing on behalf of their customers, their clients, putting it into a big pool, and then they go out and put that into a fund or a group of funds or a series of funds, and these funds in turn may be putting into multiple projects. And the projects will have to be invested in within some commonality, but it could be anything that qualifies as an opportunity zone business or a property. It might be in opportunity zones in different geographic areas. It could be over different periods of time. But as soon as you move into a multi-asset type of investment, this thing becomes very, very complex, both in setting it up, because the offering has to explain how to do that. It also becomes very complex on the exit when they go to cash out of this investment, out of all the different businesses and properties in which they've invested. They're commonly coming out at different times, and they're going to have to handle that money to make sure that it all goes where they want it to at the end of that 10-year period, where after everybody has received the full benefit of the opportunity zone tax incentives. So you've got a lot of different options here, but in this case, the fund is making an offering to investors, and in most cases, the business is making an offering to the fund. So one of the examples we've used here is the project I'm involved with, the Sugar Beet District. And in this case, we're going to be pitching to investors. This will be a sale of securities. We're looking at a 506c type of offering, which is an offering you make that's restricted to qualified accredited investors who have demonstrated that they meet that wealth status. And the money would come into the fund, and the fund in turn would invest it into Net Zero Colorado. So in this case, Net Zero will be a single purpose development company that is going to buy this 50 acres, build it out, do the improvements, and recruit the tenants and manage it for a 10-year period of time. And then as planned, there will be an option to buy all the ownership in this from the fund at the end of 10 years, creating an automatic cash exit for the investors that would gain them about an 8% annualized rate of return over the 10-year time period. Now in our case, we've set up a development company to the side, which is where we say we do all the strange things in the back of the kitchen that nobody wants to see while you're preparing the meal, so that when we present the offering, it's a very clean, asset-driven type of a project, and it frees up the development company to engage in a variety of projects using money from different funds or working on properties in different locations. But in this case, there's clearly an offering going this way, and it has to incorporate all this information. So there's no true offering taking place here. What they would ordinarily do is embed it in the fund's offering and present it to the investors. So by definition, there's only one true offering taking place. So who are the investors? This is something that we talked about last session, and typically most of the time. There are, by requirement of the law, the only type of person who can be an opportunity zone investor is someone who's recognized a capital gain from sale of a capital asset. And they're required to make an investment in cash. There's been some writings in the most recent rule proposals that maybe an in-kind type of thing could be done, but it's so unclear that I'm not even going to get into depth on that. But there are different types of investors. Once we get to the point that even though it's a narrow type of investment and it's restricted to people who have capital gains, we're seeing different groups come out of this. So right now we've got what we call the big institutions, which are typically setting up their own funds. If you want to raise money into a project, you would go make your offer to the fund and say, move the money from a qualified opportunity zone fund into my qualified opportunity zone property or business. We are then seeing groups who are, I'm going to say, wealthy individuals, and they are not as likely to have created their own fund. They may be putting money into a variety of different projects, but they will put their money first into a fund, and that's where the offer is made. And then depending upon how that fund is structured, whether it's a single asset or multiple asset, they may do a variety of things within that fund. Then we're seeing communities who are trying to get behind this. They don't have capital gains necessarily, though some do in some of the ways the organizations or programs are structured, but they're trying to make this happen in their own backyard. And so we have them influencing these decisions and maybe putting together funds for the benefit of their communities. And we're also seeing a number of people do this for social causes and other things along that line. So as a consequence, what we're seeing is a lot of different types of investors, and they're coming at this for different reasons. Even though they all want to make money, they all want to get their money back primarily and then a little extra. Some of them are coming at it purely from ROI, and they're going to judge each of these projects strictly on risk versus reward over this period of time. Whereas you get into the wealthy individuals, you might start seeing impact investors, social investors who are putting the social impact ahead of the ROI. And when we get into stakeholders, a stakeholder is somebody who probably is going to participate in this project at some level. It could be like a primary contractor who's going to do the building. It might be somebody who wants to take Jeff's project and put in the data processing center. And when they do that, they're going to get more of their benefit outside of the investment than within the investment. So they're doing this with two different motivations, and they may be quite happy to pay a lower price of money because they're making more of their money on the other side of the equation. So because of that, what you put into your offering may vary greatly. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not, hey, we've got a project, let's go make some money. You want to tailor this to your investors so that when you're talking to them, they can tell that you are talking to them. This both increases your credibility because you recognize who they are and what they want to hear, and the fact that you can differentiate them from other people. So it gives them more personal attention and improves the overall quality of the pitch. So when you go to put together the deal, this is something where, again, there's all kinds of ways of coming out of this. We're seeing people put together real estate projects where they're going, okay, we're going to create 100 housing units, and then whenever those are sold, then you're out, and you get whatever money you make. And a lot of these, in order to conform to the 10-year period, are putting them into a lease or rental type situation for 10 years, and then there's a cash event that is planned or influenced by the project managers to assure that there is a way for a cash exit to occur for the investors to have a definitive event where they can get their money back. I'm working with Tom Patton, who's not here tonight, on a workforce housing that involves opportunity zone investors, employers, their employees as the tenants of the building, where essentially the property would be constructed, it would be rented to the employees for a 10-year period. At the end of that time, the employer buys the property and flips it to the employees as a loyalty program, and everybody wins. But it's a fully orchestrated 10-year project. It's not an open-ended market will determine the outcome type of a project. As we move from classical investors, financial institutions, to impact investors who are looking for social cause, and a lot of these communities, you're going to see this as an uptick and a more and more important component of opportunity zones. They're going to start asking, well, did you put solar on the roof because we're in favor of energy? conservation or alternative energy? Did you enable the person to buy the house, to move renters into owners as part of a housing project of some kind? And there'll be other reasons why they will come to the table, and you want to know that what their reasons are for being there, and you want to be able to hit those hot buttons within your offering documents. If they have to ask the question, you may have already lost them. You may not get the opportunity to explain that to them when you get to that point. And then you have to harmonize everything. This seems like it should be obvious, but because of the existence of the Opportunity Zone Fund as a new entity, we now have to make sure that the underlying business or property that's being developed with Opportunity Zone money, that what they're doing is correctly stated in the offering documents that are submitted by the fund to the investors, and that the ultimate investment agreement also is matching together so that all these are saying the same thing. They're all talking equity, they're all talking about whether there's an exit and whether it's controlled or uncontrolled, whether there's secondary benefits and so forth. All these things need to be brought together. So at some point, these documents are going to look a lot alike. And you're going to get a set of some of these documents we're using for the Sugar Beet District. And basically, you'll start with a prime document, and then everything else is a variation off of that to try to help you remain consistent without having to reinvent the wheel as you go through the document preparation process. So that's the end of part one. We'll take a short break.